today.
Excellent.
Oh, I wanted to ask everybody if it's okay that we're recorded, because if everybody says yay, we can record it, and we could even put it on YouTube after, so that it gets a wider.
That's correct.
Or use it for your own organizations too. Everybody okay?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Thank you. I always ask my daughter to remind me because I forget to ask about the recording, and then I can't do it. So Nicole is here and Danielle are here. So we have the panel. Linda, maybe we can start.
Okay, forgive me because I don't know everybody that well, but I know that the people that are here are very committed. My name is Linda Ferlini, and I'm with HVD, and I'm the vice president. And the people that I know, like Daphne, is her accolades run are quite numerous. She's been involved with the elder abuse for many years. She's done a lot of research on this topic. She has led this organization and has achieved many and has many achievements in terms of lobbying and so on. I don't know, Daphne, if you want to add anything else to that.
No.
Because
Well, I'm
okay,
also a member of McGill Center for Studies on Aging. We should probably add.
Aging, okay. Then I'd like to introduce Daniel Pilon, who I've had the pleasure to get to know, and he is very committed. He has a radio station. He's been lobbying for years. He's done a lot of advocacy work, and I can't remember everything that he's done. And what I remember about him is that we always start with the resident, and I think that's fabulous. Then I want to introduce Nicole, who is diligent, dedicated, and works so hard for HVD. She's had a career, and she's worked for this organization and has done tremendous amount of work. And she's always on task, and for translations, for taking notes. She's diligent, and we're lucky to have her. So I don't know if I've missed anything here, or
He's also the head of a complaints committee for many years.
Oh, sorry. Yes, she's
in long-term care home.
Yeah, in long-term care. Yes. She's head of a complaints committee and has been very active.
No, excuse me, not the complaint, the resident committee.
The resident committee.
Resident committee.
It's for complaints, I think.
Oh, yeah? Oh, okay, sorry.
It's okay. You never have to apologize, Nicole. And lastly, we have Terry, who's going to be, who's here too? Terry Kaufman.
Terry.
Linda.
Is Terry, do you want me to introduce him? Yeah. So Terry was past director of the CLSC NDG. He sits on many lobby groups and at the government level, and his strategies and his lobbying is formidable, and he's quite the expert on the topic of home care and long-term care, proposing alternate models that are quite impressive. That's pretty well and he advises HVD as part of his role. So we're grateful to have him.
So Rachel is my granddaughter, and she's managing the Zoom. Could you put on my slides, please, now, as more people will be coming in, but I think we need to start. So
Daphne, do you want to start now?
Yes,
You're starting now?
Yes. So basically, I want to note one more time that today is the International Day of Elder Abuse. And I was asked actually by Madrid, who are doing an international congress today, to do something about Handicap-Vie-Dignité. They actually have been working with me a little bit for quite a few years, Gemma Perez Rojo. And it's thanks to her that I quickly put together this presentation. And I decided to focus on a panel presentation for half an hour. And the second half hour will be basically open to discussion, because we would like to hear also about your experiences about long-term care during the pandemic, and what you think also could be some advocacy solutions to trying to improve the conditions in long-term care, which is what we're going to discuss a lot about today. So I'll have the next slide, please. Our organization is Handicap-Vie-Dignité. This is our logo. So the title of today's talk is The Impact of COVID-19 on Residents of Long-Term Care Homes and Family Caregivers It's their experiences basically that we're going to discuss during the pandemic. But we're going to focus not only on the bad things that happen, which many of you have heard from me already, because we have been saying them for a long time in Quebec. We want to focus on the advocacy actions and strategies by Handicap-Vie-Dignité, our organization, and who we are and what we're doing and what we have done a little bit. And because when there's a pandemic, you kind of immediately feel you're confined to your home, everybody, and you can't do anything. But when I looked at all the things that we have been doing, I said, actually, we're a very small organization and we actually did a lot. As many of the other organizations over here also did a lot. And I see you all as our partners, and it's thrilling to be able to work together. And if we really want to improve long-term care, we need all of you to talk about what is it we really want and how are we going to go about getting it. So that's what my focus is in my talk. Next, please. Rachel, are you there? Thank you. So this is very brief. I'm not going to be able to give you the history. It's all on our website, actually, with dates and all the rest as to what Handicap-Vie-Dignité has been doing. So you can go back to our website if you want to hear more about us. Basically, it started more or less with doing many events and activities in 1995 and has been very active. And basically, the most notable thing that we did was we actually won the first class action suit. Oh, I see I spelled it wrong. Sorry, I'm missing any. Against long-term care home St. Charles Borromée, which you're probably reading about it because it was on, I think, every week for years. Took 7 years actually of negotiations. And Joanne, whom you saw earlier, our president, it was due to the work of her and Helen Rumack, who basically did that for handicapped people. And I think it was a landmark class action suit, which won actually for the residents and some of their family members, $8.5 million. This did not come to Handicap-Vie-Dignité. I'd say we got a very small amount just to make sure that it doesn't happen again and to keep the ball rolling, etc., with training programs. So our mission has been to improve the quality of care for long-term care residents in CHSLDs, starting off with physically younger handicapped people and adding in the last 5 years the whole seniors, because most of the people now in long-term care, whether they're handicapped or not, are seniors, basically. So basically, it's a much larger and broader mission now through training programs and advocacy programs. And if anybody wants to know about advocacy, they should not only listen to me, but they should more listen to Joanne Ravinder, who is an expert in advocacy and has really inspired. Okay, did I do it? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Next, please, slide. Rachel, I think everybody heard that. So I'm not going to go back in history, as I mentioned, because it's too long. I'm just going to mention the conference that we had in 2018. We thought that after the large class action suit was won, things would improve in long-term care, and particularly in long-term care homes, etc. And basically, we found to our dismay that they did not really improve. They may have improved for a while, but on the whole institutions basically were not good. The conditions were not good, etc. And the participants who came to the conference, we invited many people, over 200 people to a conference, and they expressed extreme dismay and despair at the unacceptable conditions that were still in the long-term care homes. Our workshops were used as training tools also on our website and are still there, and the whole conference is actually on our website, which can be used for training people about the most important issues to think about, including advocacy. And advocacy was stressed by our organization after the conference as the main, by the conference people and also after, as the main strategy for change. And we hired actually, Terry Kaufman volunteered to be our consultant because he's extremely and extraordinarily knowledgeable about long-term care, and particularly about home care and how things should be, and has been very active with the ministry for many years. And we made a decision to write a brief to the Minister of Seniors and Family Affairs with a statement of problems and recommendations and proposals for change. Now, all the people from RECA know about it because they voted that this should be their prime thing, trying to get these proposals and recommendations done throughout this year, which really pleased me greatly. And a lot of people have been working on this. However, unfortunately, the pandemic showed that we have a long way to go in order to achieve this. Next, please, Rachel. Thank you. Now, this is quite long and etc. Can you put it a bit more to this side? Because these are the advocacy actions undertaken before and during COVID-19. But I can't see, Rachel, the last column. If it's possible to move it slightly, it would be good. Maybe I can move it. I don't know. I don't think I can.
I can't, but if you click
well, forget about
the box, you can move it.
We can forget about the last column anyway, because we don't have time to go through them all. But I kind of chose a few of our strategies just to show you during the pandemic when which really showed how terrible, and I think people weren't really aware of how bad the conditions in long-term care were before the pandemic. But the pandemic showed how terrible the conditions were and how people suffered and were confined, and how many deaths because of basically a lot of it from mismanagement and not being prepared, and also from lack of staff. They had a huge lack of staff to take care of people, etc. Because from one day to the next, the family caregivers were taken away from one day to the next. And nobody, I think, realized how much care the caregivers were actually giving to the residents, and how much, what an important role they were doing, because once they were not there, people were, the staff had so much more work to do. And also we had so many staff that were missing during the pandemic. And it was the staff actually who brought in from their travels initially the virus that killed so many people in the pandemic. And we were, I'm not going to go into the details because everybody knows basically what did happen from Quebec in our pandemic, and happened all over the world internationally too. So I'm going to go through at least the first column of all of these. The second column is kind of the results that we got. The first column is more basically what were some of the strategies. So we were very lucky. We pushed a lot to the Ministry of Seniors and also the Ministry of Health. And we did succeed in getting 2 official meetings with the government officials. And that we were supposed to have a committee that was going to be able to follow up with the ministry how these proposals, etc., were put in action. the sad news was the pandemic, nothing was done because all of these meetings were before the pandemic started, but unfortunately, nothing was done. And so the situation got so much worse during the pandemic, and we had this huge amount of deaths. And I wanted to mention to you the book by Andre Picard that came out that is basically called Neglected No More. And this is what HVD position is basically. We don't want people in long-term care to be neglected anymore. And we would like all of us to find the solutions to make things better. And that we have to keep pushing until it is better. That's my message for the day. The other thing that we did during the pandemic, because as I said, it's kind of hard to know what to do. And when you can't go out of the home, all the people over the age of 70 were confined to their homes. I'm one of them, and some of our committee were others also. But we worked on our website a lot. So basically we offered huge amounts of information through our website. We had a first page about the coronavirus, which was fairly clear, I think. And we offered information to the public and all of our readers. We have over 2,000 people who read our website. So they could read about the pandemic in English and French. We asked for an English guide because there was only a guide initially for quite a long time, actually, only in French. And we were very shocked by that. And we did actually, within 2 weeks of our writing a letter to the ministry, we did actually receive at our doors the English guide. So I don't know if it was only because of us. I'm sure there were other organizations asking the same things, but I do thank everybody who did mention that because it was very important to the English population. We also did a lot of media. We had at least 19 media articles that we wrote. We even wrote articles to the media telling them what questions to ask because they had very regular press conferences, if you remember. So we wrote down that the questions that they should be asking to Minister Lego and Madame Blay when she was there, and Daniel McCann at the beginning, and then after Monsieur Dubé. We also had resources, training, and information about the pandemic, what to do, preparations, and where to get information from, and a lot about communication, or lack of it, with residents and caregivers. We also did 10 to 20 interviews with the media in French and English. And Nicole, who is going to be speaking to you as a caregiver, she even was on CNN, which really shows how much notice we got. Actually, it's a very tiny organization. And we were and she was in the Reader's Digest too. So as well as, sometimes we had weekly programs on the CBC also. So we got a lot of press. We were very lucky. And also I think because we were constantly working on it, we were lucky to get a lot of press, along with our partner is also in the CPM, Paul Brunet, who has been doing a lot of work also on the pandemic. He's one of our partners too. Next, the most important thing maybe that we did was also to write this petition online to protest about treatment of family caregivers and residents. And it was signed by over 750 caregivers, mostly from Quebec, and we sent them individually to the government officials. And eventually, we did get success in terms of the government changing the rules for the caregiver visits. However, it took them a very long time. So we were not very pleased about that caregivers could have been actually included and trained and handled better during that time. And what the government did do was try to train 10,000 missing personal support workers, attendants, etc. However, they lost at least 3,000 of them after the training because it's a pretty hard job, and I don't know if people always knew what it was about. And they caused a lot of problems by paying them more and paying them for the training when the other people who were already there and experienced were not being paid the same, and union stuff, etc. going on. So that's still going on. We also organized, and this is where we had a lot of international participation, which is very nice, a memorial, because nobody seemed to be doing anything about all these deceased residents in the long-term care homes. And Fort Recca partnered with us and did a lot of the work and helped us with this memorial. We were very pleased about that because our two organizations really acknowledged after the first wave, the many people who are old and who were in the long-term care homes who had died, some of them needlessly, and some of them died of abuse and neglect, and not even from COVID. The international representations were from Brazil, France, Spain, and Japan, as well as Canada. So it was well attended, and we were very happy to get a lot of participation. This is what we need to do. We realized to work with more partners and to work with alliances, because one little organization cannot alone make change. We have to have partners. We have 7 partner organizations already with our organization now, which we didn't have before. And we also, there's a major alliance in Quebec for anybody who's not from Quebec, who's here. A major alliance called the Collective Action COVID-19. And they are mediating with the government and trying to get better conditions for long-term care in Quebec. Next, please, slide. That's all I can say today. Everybody knows about my Ageism project, which came from the Observatory on Aging and Society. They offered me to do a project about ageism, because ageism was seen very clearly also through the pandemic. Ageism is about discrimination against people because of their age, and it's been written about by several researchers in the meantime, various studies, and was talked about in French by Marie Beaulieu extensively yesterday on her Zoom, if anybody was there. And the Observatory on Aging and Society had done some very nice awareness project through cartoons, basically. 32, I think there were 24 cartoons, basically. And they had asked me, which was very nice of them, to do the English communities across Quebec. And Ruth Pelletier, who is here today from Seniors Action Quebec, really enabled me to reach all over the province of Quebec without having to go out of my house since we were confined. We talked about how ageism really is about how also society treats older people and older adults. And it was very relevant, finally became actually known about through the pandemic, because it was felt that basically the way our societies in Canada and in Quebec treated seniors, and that so many older adults died because of mismanagement, lack of preparations, and all the other reasons, and the fact of our conditions in long-term care before, which were not only due to the pandemic, that came out very clearly in the media, and that we need to put a stop to it and make people aware about in the whole of Canada, but internationally as well. Next, please. So I just want to finish with a few quick, since the original Congress was about good treatments for long-term care, residents and caregivers, I thought I'd put 2 or 3, a few points, just, I'm gonna read them very fast, as to what immediately came into my mind. So having choices regarding care options, I think, is a very important one. Person-centered care, obviously, not worrying about the establishment, but worrying about what the people really need, etc. Communication mechanisms were shown need to be improved between the CUSs, these are our large social services centers, and the people in the complaint mechanisms, or people also if we have to, if the caregivers are not there within the centers, there should be at least good communication mechanisms to tell them how their loved ones are doing, etc., and not just let them die and be abandoned without having anybody around. The complaint mechanisms to be independent under an ombudsman, we feel very strongly about. Right now, they're not. Structural changes, yearly evaluations and accountability, lots of things there. Terry can tell you more about that part of it. Psychosocial model of care, not only medical, we still have a medical model of care and not enough psychosocial services. Advocacy in long-term care homes should be part of what happens all the time. It's hard even as a volunteer organization to get into the long-term care homes. Many of them still across Quebec. And lastly, evaluation of the satisfaction of the residents and caregivers constantly, at least on a yearly basis. Next, please. The last one, I think it is. So what do I mean by person-centered care? It consists of paying attention to the person's history and life experiences, their language, maternal as well as their present language, particularly in persons with neurocognitive impairments, dementias, values, preferences and needs, culture and beliefs, and their projet de vie, or what their wishes and expectations are at this stage in their life. I just wanted to put that down also. I think there's one more maybe. Next. Okay, so now I'll pass you to Daniel, who is a resident in long-term care, and I wanted you to hear what is it, how was it from a resident's point of view, and what does he think about the conditions? This is his organization, Justice de Santé, Justice of Health. Daniel?
Firstly, let me express my thanks for inviting to speak on this International Day of Elder Abuse and to have granted me the opportunity to share my personal experience in a long-term care environment since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and notably how it has highlighted the mistreatment of residents in these facilities. Afflicted with Becker muscular dystrophy since I was 19, I have gradually lost all autonomy, and I became almost completely paralyzed, and I have been a resident of the Champagnat long-term care facility for the past 7 years. My handicap has made me experience numerous challenges in the course of my life to date. I was married in 1982, and we had 2 wonderful children. We all lived together until my wife and I separated in 2005. I had another life partner beginning in 2007, but it was a difficult relationship. In 2011, I caught severe pneumonia and I was hospitalized for several months. My return home required a lot of care. My partner did her best to tend to my needs with the minimal support from home care organization. In 2012, I was arranged to move to my brother's home, but he encountered the same difficulties with the lack of support from home care and asked me to seek out other living arrangement. Lacking any alternative, I returned to my partner's home in 2014. who literally die from exhaustion, taking care of once again with nearly no support. She was taken away by ambulance to the hospital emergency. I returned to my brother for a week while we contacted the Richelieu CLSC and the Montérégie Social Service and explained my urgent need for their assistance. In May 2014, I was invited to reside at the CHSLD and Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. The Champagnat long-term care residence. I was aware at the time that they had received bad press regarding the quality of their care, and it was corroborated soon after I moved in. I quickly noticed and thoroughly disorganized system, incurring mistreatment during daily care support, staff shortages and turnover, lack of psychology services, poor nutrition, and neglect. Several years of repeating complaints by me and other residents of long-term care throughout the province have been heard, and promises made in good faith by long-term care policy makers. They just don't seem to be capable of delivering. I believe the first and most important step is to ask the residents themselves what they want to need to improve their quality of life. In 2017, I joined various advocacy groups defending the rights of those individuals requiring long-term care, notably Handicap-Vie-Dignité. The organization that want a class action suit against Saint-Jean-Borromée. I myself, in partnership with le Conseil de protection des malades and the La Rochelle law firm, investigate and was authorized a class action suit against Quebec CHSLDs for a sum of to 500 million. Due process have begun with much conclusive evidence to support our lawsuit. March 2020, I was the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and confinement measure forbidding and all family support members and visitors to enter CHSLDs. Our world, we need it change. Working remotely, virtual communication, and the complete stop of messenger air travel. back in January 2020, based on an idea shared by Robert Deforge. I had implemented a virtual online blog project with a panel. At the time, we had no idea the world would be facing and a pandemic in a few months. Who had reported a virus in China, but we were stunned to witness its quick and destructive spread across the world. As was bound to happen, international travel accelerated the proliferation of this deadly virus. Monthly attracting and killing seniors, particularly those living in the long-term care homes. 11,000 seniors perish from COVID-19. With the provincial lockdown beginning on March 13, 2020, I present my pilot project entitled Justice de Santé. On Zoom and live on Facebook, the program officially began on April 2020. My own residence, the Champagne Long-Term Care Center, was hit by COVID-19 with 4 cases surfacing in December 2020. The virus was eventually transmitted by some of his staff. Within 10 days, there were 16 additional cases and 5 deaths. All tough, rigorous sanitary protocol were adhered to the rotating personnel, and where they had been was less controllable. My personal contribution was, along with a panel collaborator and user of our diverse health network, to provide the residents worldwide with emotional support. And I love through the blog I had recently created. Justice de Santé mission is to improve health and social service, and with the assistance of these many volunteers has helped citizens and residents of long-term care home withstand the hardships and isolation of this pandemic. To date, we have a complete 386 live shows, and I take this occasion to express my sincere thanks to all volunteers, the panel and advocacy group for this valuable contribution to further this worldwide cause. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for all your relentless effort for banished abuse in long-term care residents and to improve home care supports. Let us move forward, focusing to well treatment and a better quality of life for residents of this home. Thank you.
So Nicole, I'd like you to go ahead now, please. Where is Nicole?
I'm here.
Oh, you didn't disappear.
Okay. I'd like to thank Daphne and HVD for inviting me to share my experience as a caregiver. On April 27, 2020, my mother died in a public long-term facility, not from COVID, but from neglect. She spent her last 9 years of her life in this dry, inhuman place called CHSLD. For many years, my experience with the Quebec health system was overall quite positive. As a caregiver, I could testify that both my daughter and my mother received high-quality services. I never suspected that services would be such poor quality in long-term facilities. When my mother started to lose her autonomy and was unable to live on her own, I first thought of taking her home with me. She already was receiving services from the CLSC, and I thought that would continue. The problem was that I lived in another area, so when I contacted my local CLSC, they told me that no services would be available on a regular basis and that my mother was better off staying in Montreal, where she already had services and would continue to receive them. This response left me with no choice but the CHSLD. So I opted for a CHSLD, not anyone, but one my mother was familiar with, bright, colorful, with large rooms, located in the same building as her daycare center where she was loved, cared, and respected, and in which she had a strong sense of belonging to the point of calling it a home. Plus, she used to be on their users committee. All this made me confident in my choice. How mistaken I was. If I could go back in time, I would not make this choice because my experience with long-term facilities turned out to be my worst nightmare. For the first 6 months, my mother had a different caregiver almost every day. Do you know that in Quebec public services, when regular workers apply for a new position, they have 64 full working days to try their new job and then decide whether they want to keep it or go back to their old one. Meanwhile, the position is pending and it takes more than 6 months to have it filled. This does not make sense when you deal with human beings need stability. They need to see a regular face they can relate to and recognize. My mother finally got a wonderful caregiver, Sarah. Sarah was funny, caring, and loving. My mother liked her very much. Meanwhile, I was reading the Quebec orientation for long-term facilities, un milieu de vie de qualité pour les personnes hébergées en CHSLD. I was thrilled. It gave me much hope. The philosophy and the promoted approach sounded great. Unfortunately, I rapidly discovered that it was only nice words and it did not apply to reality. Except for Sarah, most of the other workers were not very caring. They did not answer my questions, and when they did, it was as I was annoying them or not trusting them. When talking among themselves, they did not speak about Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, but about number 27, 36, the residence room numbers. I also witnessed a lot of ageism. My mother lost her loving caregiver, Sarah, after 8 months. There was cut in services and Sarah had to leave. They assigned my mother a horrible caregiver. She was cold, bossy, and harsh. I knew right away her personality would not fit with my mother's. I met with the people in charge, explained the reasons for a change, but they ignored my request. My mother's condition started to deteriorate. I used to visit her every day after work. I got the feeling something was wrong. I asked what was going on with my mother. They answered, "Everything is fine with your mother. She's in a good mood. She sings." My mother never sang. Quite the opposite, she was complaining about the manager who was bossing her around. It took me a while to understand she was talking about her caregiver. My mother needed to feel loved and cared for. She started developing behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. Her loud singing was one of these symptoms. I started feeling increasingly that something was wrong, especially when they told me my mother would be evaluated by a psychogeriatric team. I asked them to see her file, and I was shocked to read the nurse's note saying, day after day, how agitated my mother was and how loud her non-stop singing was. Remember, they told me she was in a good mood. I asked for a meeting with the people in charge and told them they lost my trust. Meanwhile, I started taking pictures of bruises on my mother's body. And after showing this picture to the health commissioner, I succeeded in having another caregiver assigned to my mother. Unfortunately, mistreatment didn't stop there. With the doctor complicity, they drugged my mother without my consent. She would be so deeply asleep, and I was worrying and anxious about what was wrong. No one would tell me they had given her an antipsychotic pill. Ironically, I discovered this the week of the National Users' Right. I immediately filed an official complaint. They told the commissioner I was the person to blame. I was causing a lot of distress among the workers to the point they were afraid to talk to me. For them, I was the bad guy, and my mother was an extremely difficult person. Then a series of reprisals are started. No doctor was assigned to my mother. Communication were very poor. An infection of C. difficile was ignored for 3 weeks. You name it. On top of that, with the Barrett reform, tremendous changes occurred. 12 different coordinators within 5 years, staff turnover, cut in services. Dealing with all these changes was so stressful, along with the progression of my mother's dementia. The day we were allowed to use cameras legally, I had one installed in my mother's room. The camera showed more and more mistreatments. Door closed at night when my mother started singing without even checking if she needed something. Incompetency, maybe the next slide, please. Incompetency, unkindness of staff, roughness, lack of assistance for meals, especially breakfast, the only meal the family could not assist with. We were there for my mother 7 days a week from 10:30 to 6:30, giving her love and support, nurturing her and helping her maintain her remaining autonomy, making sure she kept her integrity and her dignity, treating her like a valuable member of our family and of society. On March 14, 2020, when all families were banned from long-term facilities because of the COVID pandemic from one day to the next, I knew this would be the beginning of the end. Through my camera, I witnessed the neglect, dehydration, and the general indifference that led to the death of my beloved mom, Hilda Zlatarov, at the age of 102. May she rest in peace. Unfortunately, my mother was not the only adult in a long-term care home who died from mistreatment and neglect. Many had the same bitter end, and we will know about them from the coroner's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was an amazing story. And now I'd like to open it up for some discussion about long-term care. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak, or you can do the electronic hand on the
I would
screen.
prefer the electronic hand, Daphne, because it's easier
Yes.
to monitor who puts up their number if it's
Do not-
possible.
So you touch the bottom of your screen and you press reactions and there's the hand at the
Yeah.
end.
Yes.
Okay, so who's going to start the ball rolling, talking about your experiences or long-term care? Terry Kaufman is going to be possibly answering your questions, if we can answer them.
While people are waiting, maybe I could just give a few comments, Daphne?
I would love that.
Yeah, okay. Just so people realize, there's about 39,000 long-term care beds in CHLDs in Quebec. That's 2/3 of the total beds. The rest are in what we call intermediate resources, another 20,000 in foster homes. And just to say, over the first 3 months, 10% of the clientele in the CHLDs, which was 3,900, died. They died for the reasons of COVID, and they died for the reasons such as what Nicole mentioned in terms of her mother. And they died because the staff were agency staff at the time and poorly paid agency staff at the minimum wage level, who basically moved between institutions because they had precarious jobs, carrying the virus and transmitting the virus to many vulnerable seniors. And they also were not provided the appropriate protective equipment. So it accentuated the situation. I just want to add two other things as we go into this. 30 years ago, the staff in the CHLDs were basically permanent staff, including the providers who provided the non-professional care, the personal workers. The government over the year 2000 to 2020 decided they wanted to save some money. So that's how they got to these precarious agency jobs. Not considering the issue of the quality of the care to the clientele, the relationship with the clientele, as Nicole was saying, where they would have a healthy relationship and know the people that they were helping, especially since over 80% of the clientele had dementia. And so in the middle of the pandemic, after the first 10% of people, or 3,900 people, died, the government finally was absolutely freaking out as to what to do. And they agreed that they would change the positions to come and hire up to 10,000 personal care workers to replace the agency staff. So for those of you who are in Quebec, I just want you to realize they didn't increase the amount of staff. They just replaced the type of staff. And I'm just going to end on this one piece by saying the intensity, the number of hours of care that are provided to the people living in long-term care facilities, which are 92% the elderly, it's around 3 hours of direct service care a day. The norm in North America is around 4. Ontario, because of the pandemic, they did a little less badly than we did, but both were terrible. If you want to get a relative perspective to elsewhere in the world, they have decided as a government to fund, as of this year, 2021-22, long-term care institutions to go to 4 hours of direct care work per day per client. So they've increased their budget enormously to have those kind of workers. Quebec has not done that. They've changed the type of worker from an agency worker to a staff worker. That's increased the wage to ensure retention of staff. But the problem of the heavy profile of clientele requiring 4 hours of care has not been dealt with in Quebec, as they still are about 30%, and it's a new piece of research that's just coming out in the next couple of weeks that will describe that the intensity of care necessary in Quebec, which was underfunded 22% about 7 or 8 years ago, is now worse, even after these positions, at 30% intensity underfunded. So this problem is not going away. It remains, and it's accentuating, just for people to realize. And my last comment is, for those who do know, I have been consulted by the government on long-term care policy for reasons which I won't get into, but basically most of the recommendations that I've made have not been implemented. One of the comments that Nicole has mentioned on a specific case, I want to generalize that the best long-term care systems in the world, which are mainly Scandinavian countries, one of the reasons why they're the best is because they always offer an option to the clientele all through this. Do you want to remain at home? We'll provide you with the home care that's necessary. Do you want to move into an alternate residential site? Well, you can go there. You can go there with your spouse, which we don't allow. And we will ensure that it's within the cost that you're able to pay. So they organize the financing so that everybody's eligible, including grants, if they move into alternative housing. Those are things that we don't do even after the new policy came out, where best practice works. And the last comment is they're all run locally by municipalities rather than huge mega structures, which include hospitals and other types of care, as we oversee in Quebec. So I'm just concluding by saying the problem has not gone away. There have been some minor improvements, such as the size of the housing, which are now called Maison des Aînés, which will take 40 years to implement if they ever do it. But the concept is a good idea to have smaller housing for residential care, but the rest of the problems are there and will accentuate as the clientele gets more and more frail.
Terry, we have two people who'd like to speak. Sherry, I think you were the first, and then we'll have Maria.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Hi there, Terry. It's been a while, but I'm just still, concerned, and I really appreciate some of the details you just shared. I'm just asking for a little bit of clarification because we're looking at this with Seniors Action Quebec and the CHSSN as well. Just trying to, if you could just tell me, what would be the best way to find out sort of how these jobs have actually been incorporated into the system? Because I think that one of the things was that, people who did some of the training, obviously a number of people didn't complete it, a number of people weren't appropriate for it, and then it seemed that the wages that were initially promised were not actually the ones that people received when they were hired for these jobs. So I'm wondering even about retention, if people feel misled and things like that.
Last summer, there was a huge piece of publicity. There were 100,000 people who applied for these jobs because the promise was people were going to get $26 an hour guaranteed. They basically whittled that down and eventually over time hired 7,000 people. They had 7,000 people in positions. Some of those 7,000 were already in the CHLD, but in part-time positions, who moved from part-time to full-time. That's my first. They didn't explain to people that these positions were also going to require them to work evening, nights, and weekends. So a number of people, because of the seniority of this, ended up having to work nights, evenings, and weekends and did not want to do that for either family reasons or for personal reasons. The third part of this is that the training that was offered was only 1/3 of the hours of the historical number of hours required by personal care workers. So they didn't receive the full training, and the clientele are incredibly difficult, heavy in the sense of providing care in the CHLDs. And as I said, because they're understaffed, what happens is these personal care workers are running from client to client. So the personal care, the part that gets left out is the relational part. It becomes a task-oriented activity, which takes away a lot of the benefits that Nicole was mentioning in terms of relation with her mother. And it also takes away tremendous amount of satisfaction from the staff. So they had amongst the 7,000 workers who they got, a percentage who left. A number of the workers, because of the way the contract was written, the contract basically said, if we pay you, you have to work for 12 months. If not, there'll be a penalty and you have to give back some of your money. Some people have waited till about wait till about next month till that year is over before leaving. The other thing which they didn't explain about the $26 an hour was part of that was bonus. So it was not, it didn't end up being recurrent funds. So that was misleading. So that's my answers to the question, I think that you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
we move to Maria now, please? Since you've had your hand up for a long time. Maria?
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to share my ideas. I do understand Nicole. Nicole brought me tears this morning because I experienced the same thing with my mom. My mom had the language barrier first, then she was put in a home with the French Canadians. There was no communication. I had double the work. I was there more there than at home for the language, for understanding, for making it get through all the things. Then there was also the treatment in the sense that we have one way of doing things, not that we expected to have the same things, but at least a little bit of understanding in a sense that humanity, vulnerability, compassion, understanding that this woman came from Italy. And wait, my battery is running low. There we go. Sorry about that.
Well, we got the message, Maria, anyway.
Yes.
And you were
So-
saying some of the things that we said when we were saying, you know, what
Absolutely.
person-centered care is, eh?
That's right. That's right. Only if you're in it, you'll understand it. But even if you're not in it, just by hearing this testimony, you could just imagine how these people are feeling. I held my mom's hand when she died, and she, so I was there. But imagine the poor people that don't have anybody. They're asking these caregivers to at least hold their hand, maybe, or just give them a smile. But they are overworked. To my knowledge, they are very overworked and not very. They're not prepared for this type of work. They're not prepared. They're not educated. They're not. They have too much to do. They have to do the cleaning. They have to do the feeding. They have to do so many things. So my compassion is also towards them, but for the poor old people that are dying, they need their family. They need someone to be there with them. Thank you.
If I could just give a generic comment.
Can I just move to Sandra first, because I want to give other people a chance to say at least their questions or whatever, and we can maybe get back to them later if everybody has to leave earlier. Yes.
Sorry, I'll go really quickly. I just wanted to thank you for this panel. I will be doing a presentation tomorrow on Sophie Eti's work on well treatment in long-term care, and some of what good treatment, some of what you said earlier, Daphne, resonates exactly with the findings of that research, which was an action research project, was really demonstrated the importance of consulting those who work and those who live in long-term care about what good treatment looks like. So I just want to let you know about that. And I also really appreciate, Terry, your comments about taking the workers' context into account. Their conditions of work are the conditions of care. It's really important to keep in mind. And if you could just let us know, you mentioned some research coming out about the intensification of care needs. If you could let us know where we could find that. Thank you again.
So if I can just answer both of the couple of comments for the previous two speakers. One, that piece of research is a piece of research by Roxanne De Silva at U of M. You'll find it there. The comment by the person before, Maria, I just want to say that there's a new long-term care policy out. The problem with the policy and the dilemma that's in Quebec is that outside of a small number of CHLDs, which are in what they call designated institutions and indicated institutions, which is about 15% of the CHLDs, the rest are not obliged to have anybody who speaks any language other than French. And the problem is that the policy, the long-term care policy that just came out, has not changed that. So the example of Maria in relation to her mother of having staff, having people who staff who speak Italian or whatever the language is will probably not be resolved unless there is an important advocacy done through advocate groups such as the Italian Association of Seniors or others to pressure the long-term, well, the governing body over the CHLD, which is something in Quebec called the CSs, unless they advocate and pressure them to open positions which require a staff person to speak Italian, they will not have anybody speaking Italian. The dilemma with this is most important, again, because 80% of the clientele have dementia. When you have dementia, you revert to your maternal language. Even if you were bilingual, fully, that's generally what happens. And so we're going to find in Quebec, for 80 to 90% of these institutions, nobody who will be able to communicate in these institutions who are not indicated or designated with a clientele who don't have a maternal language of French. It is going to be a major, well, already is, as Maria said. I don't want to take away from what it is now, but it's going to be more and more acute in the future, this problem, because language, i.e. communication, is a key component about care, and it's a key component about relationships. If you cannot communicate, you can't have any relationship. And as you know, even if you speak the language of a person who has Alzheimer's, it's incredibly difficult, even for someone that they love, to create communication, even when they speak the same language. So this problem is not going away. It's becoming larger and larger.
Okay, Maryse, the last comment,
Hi.
I think, because we're going to
Hi.
have to.
My
end.
name is Maryse Lucbert. My mother was living at CHSLD Jean de Lalande, which is part of the CIUS Centre-Sud, and I'm a member of the Comité des Résidents there. I'm also a member of the Comité des Usagers de Jeanne-Mance, which includes about 7 CHSLD from a region in l'Hôpital Notre-Dame. And I'm a member of the QC, which is all the Comité d'Usagers of all the CIUS. When my mom was there, I was witnessing in the cafeteria that there were like some Asian people, not necessarily only Chinese, which had to spend a lot of time with their parents because there was nobody speaking the language, and then it was hard for the person who, as Mr. Kaufman said, to be understood, the Italian and others. However, when I look at les droits des usagers, you have that in English too, which is made by le regroupement des comités des usagers. Number 9 is very important. It's droit de recevoir des services en anglais. You have a right to receive services in English, which means it's a right. However, the thing is, it's the same. You can choose the person you want as a doctor or a specialist, whatever, but it depends if it's available. So Mr. Kaufman is confirming what I thought, is that yes, on the paper it's true, but the application is very hard, and it's very hard to apply anything. Yeah.
Okay,
like,
so let me just correct what you're saying.
Yes.
It's a right that the staff will speak English if you ask, if you're in a designated or an indicated institution. The institutions that you're talking about are neither designated nor indicated. So there is no right to receive services in English. I'm telling you.
Okay, what do you mean by designated or whatever?
The government has a rule as to which of the CIUS have a right to provide services in English. The CIUS Centre-Sud, I'm just telling you, does not have that obligation. If you look in the 2 or 3 CHLDs that you're describing,
yes,
they do not have staff with positions that they are obliged to have that have a criteria for hiring which speak English, or Mandarin or whatever.
Yeah, you're right.
That right is a limited right, and it's only in a small number of CHLDs in Quebec.
Okay.
Outside of that small number,
okay,
80% of those institutions, they have no right. And unless the institution decides it wants to do it, and most of them don't, they will continue, and not only they will continue not to get the service in their language, but
Okay.
because of Bill 96, which is coming out, it's going to be even harder to hire anybody
Mhm,
to be able to provide that care
mhm.
in English. So it's a principle which is only in certain locations that it's offered in a smaller and smaller number over the last 20 years, and in the future in less and less organizations going forward.
Okay. Okay.
Unfortunately, I think because it's partly my fault, because I went over my time, and we all went
Okay.
a bit over our time, except for Nicole, who was perfect. But we probably, if you feel you have to leave now, I think we might have to end the discussion for today. And I really thank you all for coming. I'm sure you have a lot more to tell us. So I want to give my own email address that people could reach me personally if they have more comments. And I will pass them on to the board or everybody else who would be able to give answers or whatever to it. But we would really want to have more feedback from you about what you think about we should be doing, we could be doing, or what could be done differently, etc. And perhaps to have people join in with our organization to do some better fighting to try to get better services for long-term care in general and have more choices. We, Terry and I were kind of the pioneers of the home care programs in Quebec. I came in 1967 when they were just about beginning to be talked about. And we worked very hard to try to enable people to stay in their homes. We still believe that home care is the very basis, first of all, of long-term care, and needs to be better and more well-serviced, etc. And we need to know how to go about getting it from the government, because the government seems to they promise all kinds of things, and then when they get elected, unfortunately, they do whatever. So we have to, I think we have to get together to really plan some strategic actions together somehow. And so people who are interested in following up the discussion, I'd like to mention my email address, which is Daphne Nah@gmail.com. Pretty easy. And also, if it could be put, Rachel, on the chat board too, please, so that people could see it. And also our website, you can join us through there too, which is Handicap-Vie-Dignité, with the at the end rather than a Y, .org, sorry, in French. In English, it's handicap-life-dignity.ca. Is that right, Joanne? I've got the right, okay. I'm always getting that number wrong. Anyway.
Everything's in the chat.
Yeah, because we'd like to maybe continue this discussion, maybe have the same thing done in French later on, so that, and put more emphasis on the discussion. If people think that that would be a good idea and reach more people in Quebec, that's one possibility. Another possibility is to kind of think of other types of actions that we could do later on together. So please keep in contact with us. Thank you all for coming. It was really interesting for me to listen to you all and to meet you all, and that you're all interested in really trying to find better services. We'd like that people who are already in the long-term care homes, also like Daniel, to be able to get out of there if they want to, which is almost an impossible situation right now. It's very, very difficult if you are living in that situation to be able to have budgets which are self-directed, etc., and that you're able to kind of find alternative living arrangements. There are so many things that people need and that they're not being listened to or getting them. But people, if I have people on the line from other countries, thank you for joining us. I hope you'll stay in touch with us too and tell us more about your countries and whatever you're doing there. I know I probably have somebody from Japan. I probably have some Tony Bernstein from Brazil. I think there are a few people who haven't had a chance probably to talk or but I will be speaking to them for sure through the email later on to get their ideas, because every country has their own issues, their own way of doing things, and the more we work together, the better we can make the whole world, I think. So I thank you. We will finish it there. Thank you, Terry, for
Thank you, Terry.